Further debate? I recognize the member from Oshawa.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And I'm pleased to be able to rise on behalf of the NDP caucus to speak to this motion. I also have the opportunity to continue as critic for the Ministry of Citizenship and Immigration, though, Speaker, as you know, that ministry no longer exists, that this is a government that has disassembled this ministry and given the responsibility to a minister, certainly, but the ministry no longer exists. But we are debating a motion, and I'm glad to read the text of the motion because I'd like to break it down for us. Quote, that in the opinion of this House, the federal government should immediately pay its $200 million share of the funding related to the cost of illegal border crossers, end quote. Speaker, right off the top, I would like to say that we take exception to 3 parts of this motion, and it's not a very long motion, so generally with all of it. First, the $200 million share of the funding, we have not seen any costing. We're not sure that that is the share. We aren't sure where these numbers are coming from, so we'll get more into that in a moment. Also, this motion assumes that we have no provincial responsibility for settlement and for caring for people who are entering our province and who are already here, and it is absolving us somehow of any responsibility, and that is a premise that we reject. And the other part of this is to say, to refer to illegal border crossers is offensive, is disgusting, and is inappropriate. And I'm happy to delve into all three of these pieces. First of all, asylum seekers that's not a term that we all get to personally define. We don't get to name people illegal crossers just because we don't like them and we don't want them here. And the fact of the matter is, as we've been sharing our inaugural addresses and getting to know each other as members of this House, there are a number of tremendous members on both sides who have come from very diverse family journeys and stories. We've heard people talk about coming from a family touched by immigration or immigrants themselves, and to imagine that anyone would call them illegal is offensive and should offend everyone in this House. But individuals can make, I'm going to read this from the Government of Canada website when it comes to immigration, citizenship, refugees and asylum. Individuals can make an asylum claim in Canada at a port of entry at a Canada Border Services Agency, Inland Office, or an Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada Inland Office. CVSA or IRCC officials will then determine if an individual is eligible to make an asylum claim, not this minister, not this premier. There are individuals who are tasked with that responsibility, and they do not sit in this room. But in terms of asylum, there is a process. This is Canada, but also we are human beings. When someone knocks at your door, you're not supposed to punch them in the face and push them off the porch. You're supposed to say, "Hi, how can I help you?" And maybe they don't get to stay, and maybe they get sent home. But fundamentally, when they arrive here, they are not illegal border crossers. They are absolutely legal, as set out by the United Nations, as set out by our country, and we do welcome them. Not everyone gets to stay, but there is a process, and due process is something that we all in Canada respect and appreciate. So let's not forget the fundamentals. And Speaker, to say that we don't have responsibility, so I'm actually going to read something from a briefing note, from a briefing document that I received from the Ontario Ministry of Citizenship and Immigration when I first took over this portfolio back in the day, back when it was a ministry, back when it existed. So, Section 95 of Canada's Constitution gives concurrent jurisdiction on immigration to the provinces and the federal government. Federal legislation exists governing immigration to Canada, but Ontario's immigration role, as determined by agreements that are legally binding by the ministry that they've, covered their ears and said, la, 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 it never existed. Ontario's immigration role supports the immigration of newcomers through settlement, language training and employment service supports, nominates economic class immigrants, although apparently we don't have the ministry anymore, who knows if that'll happen, participates in multilateral and bilateral immigration agreements, even though this government has said, we don't want those agreements, so we're just going to ignore them. Forget the fact they're supposed to give a year's notice before there are any changes made to them. They're just walking away from it, which we've been seeing, though, when it comes to contracts. So here's this new government. And the last part is policy development, analysis, research, and intergovernment relations. I would like to say that this minister is doing a brilliant job on the intergovernmental relations so far. But that is an outline of the provincial responsibility. This government may not believe that they should have it, but they do. They may not want to have it, but they do. And the last part that I will remind us about as we've been having these conversations in this House. I'm going to read from Hansard, from the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services. This was from Hansard in response to one of my questions. She said, quote, "I'm going to tell you something. My ministry is quite large. We look after children in care. We look after children who have autism. We look after children with developmental disabilities. We look after the welfare system. We look after ODSP. We look after women who are escaping domestic violence. And we look after women who are being trafficked. Where do you want to take the money from, those vulnerable people or from the federal government?" Well, that is an offensive and false choice. That is a disgusting false choice, to pick a group of vulnerable people and say they get money, they don't get money. There were 4 separate ministries in the last session. We had a ministry of the status of women. We had a ministry of community and social services. We had a ministry of children and youth. We had a ministry of citizenship and immigration. And now we have one minister responsible for all that fell under those ministries. And I do not envy her the task. That is a massive mountain of responsibility. Those with disabilities, anyone with women's issues, any women's concern, as she said herself, women who are being trafficked or fleeing abuse, social assistance, citizenship and immigration, anyone in the youth justice and corrections world. So when the Premier talks about for the people, there are a lot of people in one ministry that it doesn't seem that this government wants to deal with. And the fact that this minister has been tasked with this, I feel she's being set up to fail. And I wish her well, because all of the people in that giant amalgamated ministry deserve everything that this province can offer them, and that is fairness. So to choose one over the other is inappropriate. Speaker, I'm out of time. I'm not out of time. I will get to keep going. So, Speaker, just to continue with an explanation of what has happened in recent weeks, and a lot has happened quickly. First of all, the agreement, the Canada-Ontario Immigration Agreement, is supposed to strengthen the long-term partnership between Ontario and Canada that welcomes immigrants. This particular agreement, either party is supposed to give 1-year notice before ending the agreement, but just in a few short weeks, this government said, nope, not going to happen. We're turning our backs on this agreement. We don't like it. We don't agree with it. Forget that it's their responsibility to honour it. It's just now they're saying it's the federal responsibility. Well, this particular minister was in Ottawa earlier this week, and she testified to the Federal Standing Committee on Citizenship and Immigration. Her report was, to say the least, chaotic. We have seen in the media that the numbers were flying wildly. The minister claimed that she has $90 million in, quote, annualized welfare costs. Well, this raises a lot of questions. Does the minister mean that total payment to all social assistance recipients this year will cost $90 million? I don't know. Does she mean all refugee claimants are likely to receive a gross total of $90 million in benefits by year's end? I don't know. Or is she only talking about the 1,000 or so claimants who are facing homelessness on August 10th? We don't know. Despite clearly asking the minister about this claim in question period, we still don't know the answers. So here we have a motion asking us to just take at face value, or to take them at their word, it's a $200 million, share. Is it? We don't know. And to vote on a motion that hasn't been costed, it feels like the campaign all over again with no plan. But anyway, maybe it's in my desk. I haven't checked. But it is noteworthy that the minister also said that Ontario needs $20 million in education costs to educate the children of crossers, which is another disturbing, I would say, dog whistle term from this government. And that is problematic. This illegal and border crossers and name-calling to paint a picture of legitimate refugees, of people who are coming here seeking asylum, who are knocking on Canada's door and saying, I am fleeing a bad situation. It is not up to this minister, this government, this premier to say, yes, we pick you. Yes, you're allowed. No, you're illegal. No, you're not. You didn't come to the right port of entry. I don't like you. This is not how we do things here. And I don't mean here in this legislature. I mean here in this country. I mean here as members of humanity. Where is that? You want to talk about dignity? Well, where's the humanity, for crying out loud? Back to that committee. The committee asked the minister to provide a detailed costing of where these numbers are coming from. Every member of this House should have those numbers before they're being expected to support a motion. And I will go back to saying that we know that this minister, quite frankly, and with, you know, like I wish her well, she has been given an unbelievable bucket of vulnerable people all in there together. And to imagine that we are being given the choice by this minister to pick one, who gets the money, where is it going to, where is it going to come from, and no one is going to get what they need in terms of housing, in terms of settlement supports, because they're playing a game of chicken with the feds. There are people here in our province now who deserve housing, who deserve care, who deserve support, and where is the provincial responsibility? Because you have not been absolved of that. The fact that you've chosen to walk away as a government and say we don't wanna doesn't mean you don't have to. This legislature respects the backgrounds and the strengths and the stories and the journeys of all members from all ridings, regardless of party. And I've listened to wonderful remarks from around this room, and we should be celebrating everyone who comes to Ontario. We should be allowing them to knock on the door and say, how can we get you into this system? How can we get you that support? And Speaker, I look forward to the rest of this conversation, but I think that the country does recognize that we do stand on humanitarian principle, that there are areas of responsibility, and you cannot just throw up your hands and say, we don't wanna. The minister, I want to be clear, we support this minister in her endeavours to support all 4 of these combined ministries. And I hope that she is able to do this. I hope this government is able to support all of these people. But we absolutely cannot support a motion that has not been costed or that absolves this government of its responsibility to support people living in Ontario, because no one is illegal, whether you name them such or not. Thank you, Speaker.